in this path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we said that we came down to this earth. The thing about being on this earth is that, as the angels pointed out, it is going to be a place of struggle. It isn't going to be like Jannah was. So how do we survive? I guess this is a question a lot of people want to know. How do we survive? How do we survive the loss? How do we survive the struggle? How do we survive the pain? How do we survive? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He sent Adam down to this earth, He told him how to survive. He said, when He sent him down, "Go you down, all of you, and if there comes to you, as there will, a guidance from me, whosoever follows my guidance, no fear will be on them, nor shall they grieve." So you see, we have been sent down to this place where, yes, there will be struggle, and yes, there will be some spilling of blood, and yes, there will be some spreading of mischief. But Allah has given us the secret of how to survive, and so that we don't have to be afraid or fall into despair. And that is in the guidance of Allah. It is in the remembrance of Allah. Allah tells us, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." Indeed, in the remembrance of God do the hearts find peace and satisfaction. There's one thing that everybody wants. What's the one thing that everybody wants? Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, agnostic. What does everybody want, essentially? Say it again. Happiness. Isn't that what everybody's seeking? The problem is they seek it in the wrong place sometimes. But we all want the same thing. We all want happiness. But where is happiness? Where do you find happiness? What is happiness? Allah tells us that happiness, true happiness, can only be found in His remembrance. And you can look for it anywhere else, you will never find it. In fact, Allah says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, for him will be a miserable, narrow life. You know, this idea that happiness is in physical pleasure, or happiness is in money, or happiness is in status. That's not happiness. That's the happiness of cattle. Because what does an animal need to be happy? Only thing an animal needs to be happy is to be fed and to have its physical needs of all different types satisfied. The animal's happy. That, if the human being is like that, if the only type of happiness that the human being is looking for is physical happiness, you know, I eat, I sleep, and I satisfy my physical desires, so I'm good. That's the same as an animal. That human being becomes no different than an animal, because that's the same thing an animal needs. Similarly, an animal doesn't ask before it eats the plant, is this halal, right? The animal doesn't ask before it reproduces, or before, you know, if two animals are reproducing, they don't ask, is this halal? Are we married first? Let's go, you know, do nikah first, right? Animal doesn't go through that process. Animal has an urge, animal follows urge, right? There's no in-between pause to ask, is this allowed? Is this halal? Are we married? Is this okay, right? Animal wants, animal takes. Do we have human beings who act like that? Yeah. We have human beings who act like that. I'm attracted to you. It doesn't matter if I'm married to you. It doesn't matter if you're the same gender. I'm attracted to you. I feel, I obey. I feel, I act. There's no question of morality for an animal, right? But when a human being acts that way, then we become lower than the animals, because an animal doesn't have the ability to look at morality, whereas we do. whereas we do. And if we aren't using that ability, we become lower than the animals. And if we do use that ability, we have the potential to be better than the angels. You know why? Because remember what we said about the angels. We said the angels don't have a choice, right? The angels don't have a choice in worshiping Allah, and you do. So if you use that choice, you have the potential to be better than the angels. But you also have the potential to be lower than the animals. It's in the remembrance of Allah that the hearts find peace. It is not found in physical pleasure. It is not found in the physical world. It can only be found in the remembrance of Allah and in following His guidance. To try to seek it any other place, you will never find it. Now I'm going to, Insha'Allah, just end with some practical, sort of prescription. How do we get through this path? How do we get back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without stumbling, rather without drowning along the way? Because we do all stumble, but as long as we get back up and we keep going, we'll be okay. First is we have to hold tight with every ounce of our self to the remembrance of God. First and foremost, this is in our prayers. Because the Prophet ﷺ told us that the very first thing that you and I will be asked about on the Day of Judgment is our prayers. And he says that if your prayers are okay, then everything else will be okay, that you will have succeeded. And if your prayers are not, then you will have failed. Sometimes we put a lot of effort into other things in our life, but if our prayers aren't in order, we won't be able to be successful. This is very clear. And in fact, and this is something I want you to really reflect on, there are a lot of sins that a person can commit, right? But do you know that there are no single scholar who says that if you steal, there's no scholar who says if you steal, you're no longer a Muslim. There's no scholar who says that if you commit fornication or adultery, you're no longer a Muslim. There's no scholar who says that if you drink alcohol, you're no longer a Muslim. Even the taking of life. And yet there are scholars who say, based on a hadith, that if you don't pray, you could be considered no longer a Muslim. Yet we take our prayer very lightly. We can point fingers at someone who's clubbing and drinking and doing these things, and yet we take our own prayers lightly. Although in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a greater sin? A person, some scholars say that a person who purposely leaves their prayers, like out of, just to disobey, that this can actually be considered something that makes you no longer a Muslim. There's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says that the difference between the Muslim and the disbeliever is in the salah. So the first thing we need to focus on in this path back to God is our prayers. So many times people say, I want to get closer to God, but I don't know how. What do I do? Where do I start? This is where you start. You start in solidifying and rectifying your prayers. And you become firm in them, meaning that no matter what situation you're in, you never give up your prayer. It also means that you take the prescription as it is prescribed. So when you go to the doctor gives you a medication. Suppose you need antibiotics for a very bad infection. And doctor says you need to take this 3 times a day at specific times of the day, right? You need to take it once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the evening before you sleep. What happens if you say, you know what, forget about that, doctor. I'm gonna take the medicine whenever I feel like it. You know, some days I won't take it at all. Some days I'll take 2 pills and miss 1. And some days I'll take all 3 right before I sleep. Okay, what's gonna happen? Well, either it's not going to work and you'll get sicker and sicker, or you could actually overdose and kill yourself, right? What do we do with our prayers? Well, we say, you know, I'll take it, you know, whenever I feel like, when I have time. Would you do that with medicine? Would you do that with medicine? I don't have time right now, so I'll just take it all before I sleep? We wouldn't do that with medicine because we're very careful to take care of our body. We're very careful about our body. Would you ever go a few days without eating anything? Not unless you're trying to kill yourself, right? Would you ever go a few days without drinking anything? A week? We are very keen not to starve our bodies. We are very keen to take care of our bodies and to give our body medicine when it's sick. We're very keen to clean our bodies. But we completely neglect our soul. We completely neglect our hearts. We don't feed our hearts properly. We don't take the medicine properly. And we don't clean it properly. Now, how do we do these 3 things? You know, with our bodies, if you want to get in shape, what do? You eat healthy and regularly. You don't skip meals, you know, for days at a time. And then you work out. And when you work out, does anyone say, okay, I want to get in shape, you know, I want a 6-pack or whatever, and so I'm going to go and I'm going to work out one day for like 8 hours straight, and then I'm not going to work out again for 2 months. Is that going to work? It doesn't work, right? Everyone knows that doesn't work. Is it better for you to go and work out for 8 hours straight and not go for another month or 2? Or is it better to do even 25 minutes every single day? Which one is better? You're gonna see results with 25 minutes every day, but you are not gonna see results with the 8 hours and nothing, right? So we see this in the physical reality. It's the same exact rule in the spiritual world. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah loves the deeds which are constant, even if they're small. You see what that means? It means that this whole, I'm gonna read the Quran 5 times in Ramadan and then not open it for another whatever many months, that doesn't work. That's like the person who goes to the gym for 8 hours and then doesn't work out for another few months. You can't eat a really, really big meal and then say, okay, I'm good now for the next 2 weeks, right? It doesn't work. Allah is the same one who created the system of our physical world as the one who created the system of the spiritual world. You understand there's only one designer. The same designer who made the physical world and designed the rules of the physical world also made and designed the rules of the spiritual world. What works in the physical world works in the spiritual world, and what does not work in the physical world does not work in the spiritual world. But we've become so blinded that we only follow, we don't understand that. We understand the physical laws very well. You and I understand that if you don't eat, you starve, right? But we don't seem to realize that if we're not feeding our hearts with the remembrance of God, our hearts also die. A dead heart is a heart that doesn't see or feel properly. A sick heart is a heart that can look at black and see it as white, who will actually see the haram and it looks like it's something good, and look at the halal and see it as something bad. The reason that happens is because the heart is sick, the heart is dirty, the heart is dead. And it's your heart with which you see the world. Don't think that you see the world with your eyes. Because Allah in the Quran, He talks about the heart and He says that it is not the eyes that become blind. but it is the heart inside of the chest that becomes blind. You could be able to see with your eyes, but your heart is completely blind. And in the hereafter, Allah puts us in that physical state that we were in this life in a spiritual sense. For example, Allah says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. So Allah says that the one who turns away from my remembrance, he has a miserable life in this life, and then when he's brought back to Allah, he's brought up to Allah blind. Allah says that he's actually brought up blind. And that person will say, oh Allah, why did you make me blind when I used to be able to see? What's happening here? He used to be able to see with these, but he actually was blind inside. So Allah made him blind outside on the Day of Judgment. It's a physical manifestation of his internal state as it was in this life. Because he forgot about the signs of Allah in this life, Allah says, so today you will be forgotten. This is true blindness. You know, we talk about poverty, right? Poverty we think is the person who doesn't have money, right? That's not poverty. It's not poverty. There are a lot of celebrities out there, they have a lot of money, but they are completely poor. Poverty is the poverty of the heart, the poverty of the soul. It's the soul or the heart that is disconnected from its creator. Simply put, that's poverty. We shouldn't feel bad for the one, you know, we should always help the poor, right? But our problem is, we only think that we need to help those who are poor financially. And somehow we don't see the real poverty. The one who may have money, but is really poor. We cry when someone dies, right? But when someone dies, what's really dying? The body. It's the body that disintegrates, but what happens to the soul? It moves from one realm to another realm, right? We all know this. It goes to the grave and the barzakh, the time in the grave. But we cry because the body is gone. But what about the people whose bodies are still alive, but inside they have died? There are a lot of people walking around and their bodies are just fine, but inside they have already died. The one who doesn't know his creator has already died inside. That is the heart that is dead. And the heart that is dead feels nothing of the reality of life. That's the heart that only cares about material things, only cares about dunya, but doesn't have any connection with its creator. That's truly the heart that's dead. How do we prevent this from happening? How do we make sure that our heart doesn't die? First, we said the remembrance of Allah, right? And we said it's specifically the 5 daily prayers, because this is the first thing we'll be asked about. And not only, you know, sometimes we're like, yeah, I'm gonna pray when I get home, right? It's that person who's taking all 3 pills before they sleep. But I have a question for you, and I want you to think about it for yourself. See, I want to clarify something. It's not only a sin to miss prayer, but it is a sin to pray outside of the time of prayer. And it's a major sin. So when Allah says Fajr is to be prayed in a certain time interval, which we know, right? It must be prayed in that time interval. When Allah says that Dhuhr is supposed to be from Dhuhr until Asr, it must be prayed in that time interval. Asr, He gives us the time between Asr and Maghrib. Maghrib, He gives us from Maghrib till Isha. And Isha from Isha until some say midnight, some say Fajr. The point here is we have an interval of time. Now a lot of people come and say, I can't pray it on time because of XYZ reason. Some of those reasons are, I'm busy at work, or I'm busy at school, or I'm in a meeting, or I'm at the mall, or I'm watching a game, or I'm watching a movie, or I'm at a party, whatever it is. But the question we have to ask ourselves is this, and this is a very just sort of, it's sort of a comical question, but it's very real. And that is, imagine that you're in the most important meeting of your life. You're in the most important exam of your life. You're having the most comfortable sleep of your life, and you need to use the bathroom. It's inevitable. It's gonna happen, right? And you need to use the bathroom. So my question to you is, what do? You take your leave and you go to the bathroom. But what if it's a really important meeting? What if it's a really important exam? What if it was the most comfortable sleep of your entire life? Are you really gonna get up and use the bathroom? Yeah. Who says, you know what? I gotta finish this exam, so I'm just gonna take care of my business right here where I'm at. Does anyone do that? Yeah, not since you were 5. Not even 5, right? Or you're sleeping and you're like, I'm way too comfortable. Who cares? Right? That's like, right? 4-year-old maybe, 5-year-old, but not since. What do? You get up, no matter how tired you are. You step out of that meeting, no matter how important it is. You get up away from the exam, no matter how important it is, and you go and use the bathroom. Am I right? Okay. So my question to you is, where there's a will, there's obviously a way, because you have made it a priority. Why do you do that? Why do you say, no matter what, I'm gonna go use the bathroom? No matter what it is that you're gonna have to sacrifice, the potential humiliation of taking care of your business where you're at far outweighs any other consequences. Am I right? So your professor's not gonna like it. Well, sorry. I'm sorry, I gotta go, right? You're in bed, you're comfortable, I'm sorry, I gotta get up. So don't you think it's strange that we put the needs of our body over the needs of our soul? Don't you think it's actually tragic? Because our body is passing away anyways. Our body is gonna end up in the dirt. And it's our soul that lasts. And it's our soul that we're stuck with. You know, however you took care of your soul, you're stuck with it. You're stuck with it forever. Forever. Can you imagine that? Whatever condition you left your soul in, that you made your soul in, you're stuck with it. And you can't escape it. You can't go back and say, no, let me purify. Let me clean it up a little bit. You're stuck forever. Whereas your body, you get a new one. You know what I'm saying? It's going, it's changing, it's passing away. And yet our focus in life is take care of my body, take care of my bodily needs, take care of my physical needs. I want, I take. My desires command, I obey. But we neglect the soul that's lasting and that's returning to Allah, and then you're stuck with it. In whatever state you have built, in however much you've purified your soul and your heart, that's what you're stuck with forever.